Today, I have a very special guest on the podcast. Her name is Sarah Wells, and she is an Olympic hurdler and a keynote speaker. And I never thought I would be interviewing an Olympian on the podcast, but here we are. I'm so excited to be able to hear your story and hear some fun tips from you, Sarah.
I'm so honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. So today we are going to talk about Sarah's journey to becoming an Olympian. And since she's a hurdler, we'll be talking about some of the hurdles that she's had to get over during her journey. So I'm so excited to hear more about that from you today, Sarah. So before we get to the fun stuff, I want to learn a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I feel honored and blessed to get to do this work and impact audiences all over North America. And I speak about excellence. And, as an Olympic athlete, I think people expect me to then share excellence from a standpoint of like, hey, come to the top of the mountain. Like, here's how you achieve stuff. But I don't actually feel like that is where I have my greatest impact. I do speak about overcoming obstacles and achieving excellence from a success standpoint. But I actually think the more important element of excellence is that it's less about the outcome and more about who we become in the pursuit of that goal. And so when I talk about excellence, I really try to help people see that often we are more familiar and we pursue success, but that if we are actually brave enough to pursue excellence, that will take us much further than any pursuit of success ever will. And so, success is desired by many, yet only achieved by a few. What I mean by that is like, there's only one Olympic gold medal in my sport, or there might be only one CEO of an organization, or only a handful of people that get promoted each year. And so, success is desired by many, but only achieved by a few, yet excellence is available to all of us, but only pursued by a few. And so I feel passionately about showing people that excellence is for everyone. And we can find small ways to bring excellence into our daily lives as long as we become aware of how to do that. So that's what I do.
We'll be talking a little bit more about pursuing excellence later in this podcast, so we will wait for that. But one thing that I love asking my interviewees is, what's one thing that you love the most about the events industry and speaking at events?
Honestly, it's the people. It's the fact that you get to meet people from all different industries, all different backgrounds, people who have their own stories to share. And when you get off a stage and your message has resonated with an audience, they come up and share something that's gone on in their lives of why that struck a chord or how they're going to change the course of their actions and lives now because of something you've said. And that's just like a very rare thing to get to tangibly see the impact of your work. Like, there are many careers that you work decades on something and you may not see the true impact of your work. And as a speaker and in events, you get to see that like so immediately. And sometimes it's not immediate, but you speak at an event and then 2 years later, someone finds you through your website and writes you a message being like, hey, you might not remember me. You spoke at this event I was at. And like, I just wanted to let you know, here's something I've changed because of you. And it's so special and really, really powerful as a motivator to be like, oh my gosh, like, how do I make a bigger impact?
That's amazing. I know with keynote speaking, you get to meet so many new people and you get to impact people's lives. And
yeah.
I definitely feel that with the Tag Talk blog that I write. It's, a blog that's going to real people. I'm putting fun tips and tricks and resources into my newsletters. And it's so special to me when people reply to my emails or send me a connection on LinkedIn, like, hey, I saw you at this conference, like, let's connect. It's about the people for me as well.
Yeah, and that's how Megan and I met. Is I read one of your blogs. I was like, wow, you're amazing. Like, thanks for putting this information out there. It's so great to learn about the industry. So you're so right. Like, it's a small world and it makes it feel like, oh, my people are out here.
That's such a special thing about the events industry is everyone wants to come together, share ideas, learn new things, meet new people. That's something that I love about the events industry as well.
I completely agree.
So I would love, before we kick things off, to hear a fun fact about yourself, just to keep things a little fun.
Yeah, sure. So, a fun fact, I do love chocolate chip cookies. And so every city I go to, if I have enough time, when I'm speaking there, I will seek out what is the best chocolate chip cookie in the city. And my husband joins me in that journey because, he's not at every speaking event, but when we go and visit friends or we travel anywhere, we are on a quest to find the best chocolate chip cookie of any and every city we go to. So in case you're wondering, the top chocolate chip cookie in the Sarah Wells ranking is actually in Austin, Texas, at a place called Thoroughbred. It's like just this small bakery and like kind of this like neighborhood area. It's not even downtown. But oh my God, my like mouth was exploding of deliciousness. And so, yeah, fun fact, people think I eat healthy because I'm an Olympic athlete. And I'm like, oh no. I am a cookie monster. Yeah.
Does it have to be chocolate chip specifically?
So I feel like the chocolate chip is like the classic, so it's a good standardized, be able to like compare apples to apples or cookies to cookies. But we still try other kinds. You can't just get one cookie when you go to these places.
Exactly. I don't know, Sarah. I feel like maybe I should start doing that as well.
Honestly,
then we can compare our lists.
I would love that because then we can double expand, get more cities. I love it.
There you go. We can tag
blog
team.
Idea. Yeah.
There you go. Best cookie in the US. Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that. So let's go ahead and get started on your, journey to becoming an Olympian, because I'm sure everyone listening wants to know more about that. So, hurdling is so cool. I don't know too much about it, so I'd love to ask you some questions about hurdling. So how did you first get involved with hurdling? That's a very niche and interesting sport.
Yeah, honestly, so I am not athletic, and I know that seems like counterintuitive, but genuinely, I showed up to high school and tried out for every single team, like basketball, volleyball, soccer, field hockey, badminton. Like, I just wanted to be athletic and have a team so bad. And I got cut from every single team. And so I was like, oh, wow, like I am not athletic. And until springtime, a high school teacher saw me in gym class, saw me like sprint to a soccer ball, dead stop, accelerate away again, because didn't really do anything with the ball. And he was like, oh, Sarah, you should come out for the track team. Like, I want to teach you how to hurdle. And that high school teacher was like changed the course of my life because he saw something in me, and he happened to be the varsity hurdles coach at a local college nearby. And so he was a high school teacher in the day and then coached the college in the evenings. And he was like, no, come train with me. And so under his guidance and his belief in me is where like I suddenly started to train. And within a few months, I won my first race. And then within a few years, I actually won our version of the state championship. And then we were like, okay, like, let's set our sights on one day, maybe we could be an Olympic athlete. And so that high school teacher and I actually stayed coach and athlete for 9 years till we made the Olympics together, which is
That's amazing.
Crazy, like very unheard of. And, he changed the course of my life, and he's still involved in my life. And, he was at my wedding, and he's met my 7-month-old daughter. And like, yeah, he's a big part.
We're coming back again to that small world topic. So
yeah.
Now I need to ask you, what is it actually like to hurdle? It's hard for me to wrap my head around because I am not coordinated enough to even attempt to do that. So what is the technique for hurdling?
So there's actually this like kind of audience engagement activity that I do in some speeches where I have someone literally overcome the obstacle that is in their brain for a big goal that they're chasing. That's like, what's that limiting belief that you have? And so I actually usually pull someone up on stage and I get someone else to volunteer to be the hurdle. And I teach them how to hurdle on stage. So this is perfect because there's a kind of a way I describe it to them where I say, okay, you got to drive your knee up. So I don't know if you can see me here, but you drive your knee up and, that's called your lead leg, the leg that you drive your knee up and then you kick it out. And then your trail leg, which is your second leg, has to get over the hurdle. And so I always say you pick your leg up like you're peeing on a fire hydrant and then you bring it around. So you drive your knee, kick it out, pee on a fire hydrant and bring it around.
Interesting.
So that is the, probably not the technical technique, but that is the way I choose to describe it to people. And it often goes pretty well, but
you
it
might
can
have,
be scary. Because
you might have convinced me to try it just once.
Yeah, great.
And see how awkward it feels. But obviously you took it to a professional level. So that's so awesome. And I'm excited to hear about your journey of getting to there. So I know everything hasn't been super smooth for you during your training journey to get to the Olympics. It sounds like you had some hardships during your journey at a high level. Could you walk me through like some of the roadblocks that you had to, overcome on your road to achieving your Olympic dreams?
Yeah, of course. It's like every pursuit of excellence or whatever that goal is for you, often we know it's going to be hard. That's like part of what makes it so desirable, or makes it kind of like light us up when we do achieve it, is because it took some work to get there, or you had to overcome things along the way. And so I have two Olympic pursuits, and the London Olympic Games was my first games. And I actually got a stress fracture in my femur the year before. And so I had never touched Olympic standard before, which is the minimum qualifying time you have to hit in order to go to the Olympics. I had never come close. I had to actually improve a whole second if I was going to get there. And a second in the sport of track and field is a very long time. And so when I'm pursuing this London Games, and then I get this stress fracture in my femur. So your femur is your massive thigh bone, biggest bone in your entire body. And mine was cracking in half. And so
doesn't sound like it would feel too good.
Right? No, like you probably don't want the biggest bone in your body breaking in half the year before the Olympics. But I ended up sitting on the sidelines for what was supposed to be 3 months. And that ended up turning into 9 months. And so the year before the Olympics, I'm watching teammates and friends get better and faster and stronger. And I'm watching my dream just like slip away. And when I was finally cleared to run after 9 months, on my first day back to training, I got the word believe tattooed onto my wrist. And I said, when I make the Olympic Games, I'm going to put the rings underneath here, which people were like, that is a horrendous idea. Like, do not tattoo yourselves of your goals. And I was like, no, like, you don't understand the 9 months I just went through, like the epic self-doubt, the like brutal rehab and different kind of training that I had to do in order to get back to who I was. And I just knew that like, if I could get through that, if anyone could do this, it was me. And so I got the word believe tattooed on my wrist. And 6 months later, which is all the time I had left in order to qualify, I blow my own mind. I make the Olympic Games. I qualify to go to London. And I don't even just make it there. I actually went on to become a semifinalist and one of the youngest competitors in the field. And so I was like, holy moly, believing in yourself works. And that was really my first kind of exposure getting into speaking, is because suddenly I realized like this power of when we have these big ambitions, like going all in, like genuinely putting both feet and like betting on yourself and being brave enough to understand that like, yeah, this could not go to plan, but you won't know unless you actually put yourself in position to see it. And so we can't let our circumstances define our outcome. We have to see it through. And that takes us being brave enough to go all in. And so I'll often, when I speak to organizations, like joke about like, what's the tattoo we're all getting next year, guys? Like, is it like supply, or like, some people have kind of personas for their organization where I get like the, jokingly get the name of that person for your org. And I've actually had event planners make temporary tattoos of like the joking like slogan for the organization, so that after I do the keynote, they're like, come get your tattoo over here, which is kind of hilarious.
Great event engagement idea. Maybe
great event engagement. Yes. But that story, I recognize how important it was for me to have to go through that and endure the challenge and the obstacle in order to see the power of it, and so I'm so grateful for having cracked my femur leading into the Olympics, because I think it's allowed me to share a story that can inspire others to be brave enough to do that for their goals too. And there's a second half of the story, but maybe one of your other questions will end up bringing out what happens later.
What you just said, I feel really applies to event planning as well, because event planners, they have this idea in their head about how the conference is supposed to go. And at some moment or another, sometimes things don't go as planned. Maybe there's a big flub, or there's a tech difficulty. And, from there, it's like, oh my gosh, everything's falling apart. I don't know how to bounce back from this. But like you said, sometimes with those hurdles, for lack of a better word, when those hurdles pop up, maybe the ending outcome ends up being even better than you ever would have thought. Or maybe it was a teaching moment or a learning moment for you. It's like, okay, now I know how to make things even better for next time. So I like that focus on cultivating your excellence and, focusing on turning those mistakes or those oopsies into learning moments.
Absolutely. Because you're right. Like as you're playing an event, if you know the status quo and the way that you've done it, and you're like, well, this works, and I don't want to, mess with the status quo. It's like, well, then if you're not willing to kind of like push those boundaries, like go all in on like, what's the 2.0 version of this? Well, then, challenge yourself to grow. And it's so scary to do that, to be like, all right, I'm going to do something really big. We're going to do AV like we've never seen it at this event before, like we're going to get, I don't know, the people who like twirl from the ceilings or something, and that can be scary, but that might be like a shared experience that the audience has, and that like just revolutionizes the way people experience the conference. And so you're absolutely right. Like event planners, it's like, there's a lot of, there's a lot of like different ways you can like add different bells and whistles, but it can be scary when you're like, but I don't know if this works yet.
Absolutely. I want to take one moment to step back a little bit. So you were talking about how you were having those hardships after hardships after hardships. Was there in your mind a moment where you're like, I can turn this around. I can, flip my down in the dumps attitude to moving more towards a positive mindset and like, hey, I can do this. I can turn this around and get to the Olympics and achieve my dreams.
Yeah, like and it wasn't just this like light bulb moment, but it truly was that like kind of each time I kept going back to the doctor being like, is it healed yet? And he's like, no. Is it healed yet? No. There was like moments of defeat and like dark moments and days, but I had this incredible support system around me that reminded me why like I had the skills and experience, and my coach would say like talent doesn't go away. And so what can we do to stay within reach of that goal? Because you're still talented, though you might not be as fit as you once were right now. That doesn't mean that we can't, get back to that. And so let's not throw our hands up in the air and call it a wash. Like, let's still stay within reach of the goal. And so there was definitely moments and times where I did consider giving up. But there was also this practice of like, well, what's one small step I can take today? And what is possible still right now? And that looked like going to the gym and sitting on the floor and not putting any weight through my femur, but doing arm exercises so that I could have a really strong arm drive when I was cleared to run. Or it was doing core work so that I could be an even better hurdler once I was cleared to run. And so there were these small ways that we focused in and like on things that we could still control and ways that we could still create momentum. And one thing I'll often tell people is that like, just being like, I believe in myself doesn't mean that like, okay, everything's going to turn around and everything you want is going to come your way. Like, that's not what I mean when I say like, go all in and believe in yourself. Like, it's not just going to like start magnet, attracting towards you by just saying it out loud. And if you don't actually even believe it, it's actually even worse to start saying it out loud because you don't believe it. And there's a study that was done that actually said that if you use affirmation when you don't believe it, it can make you feel worse, not better, because you feel even more like an imposter.
I could believe that.
Yeah, right. Like me too. Like I'm thinking of a moment right now of like a time where I was at a race being like, I can't beat that girl. And me being like, yes, I can, like only made me feel like, no, I'm putting even further space between her and I right now. And in those moments though, it's like, well, what of this is possible? Like, well, how close could I get to that athlete, or, okay, I can't, maybe if an event planner did an event for 500 people last year, it might not be that like, okay, next year I'm gonna do an event for 3,000 people. It's like, okay, well, that might be a little ambitious of a skip of a jump there. That's not impossible. So absolutely set the goal, be brave enough, go all in, do the thing. But what of it is possible? Well, maybe it is possible to try to double your attendance. Or maybe it is possible to add a new experience that's going to create people talking, which is going to be the stepping stone to lead you to the 3,000 person event in the future. And so there's just like, similarly in my journey, it was my coach constantly saying like, well, what of this is possible? And what can we do? And as we continue to take those actions, we started to build momentum. And eventually I started to believe again that this could still be possible. And, there's a slide I have in my presentation that says, where we're at today is not a predictor of who we can become in the future. And that's what I had to remind myself in those early days back to training, where I couldn't win a practice, let alone try to win Olympic trials, And so it was about like, well, where I'm at today doesn't matter. as long as I am being consistent, I'm chipping away, I'm doing the things that lay the foundation of excellence, which will lead me to my goal, now or in the future, or get me a heck of a lot closer than I ever thought was possible. So, yeah, it was the kind of this momentum building. It wasn't like a light bulb moment of like, I can do it, but it was like a slow progress.
I really like that best practice of, challenging yourself. What if this could happen? What if I could achieve this? Because then it kind of gets us in this mindset like, okay, this, in this moment, maybe I don't feel like this is realistic, but it could be realistic for me. So like, let's put myself in that mindset of envisioning how I could get there. And I also like that visual. It's like you will get from A to B. It might not be a linear path. You might have to take some roundabouts to get there, but you're still moving towards that goal. It might just not be that route that you initially envisioned for yourself, but that doesn't mean that it's any worse or any better than what you had envisioned.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So I want to talk about you eventually going to the Olympics. And I love that you didn't give up. You knew that you could do it and you decided that this was not the end. So you were going to get to the Olympics. So I want to ask, what was it like to, continue training, and finally getting to compete at the Olympics? What was the vibe when you finally got there?
Honestly, the Olympics was surreal. Like it was just wild. Like this thing that I had in my mind for like a decade, like I'm pursuing, I'm like, I want this. And then when you're suddenly there, it's just like looking around and being like, holy moly, like I'm actually here, like it was pretty wild. And in the most important races of my life, I've been able to ignore all noise, like the gun goes off and you can't hear or see or, do anything. Like you're just fully immersed in your race experience. And when the gun went off at the Olympics and 80,000 people like rise
Oh my gosh.
and are like, ah! Like I just remember coming out of the starting blocks and being like, that's a lot of people, like,
and they're all watching
a lot
me.
of people. It was so surreal. And, I this sounds limiting because I'm like, believe in yourself. And then I'm like, I knew I wasn't going to win a medal. Like, quite frankly, I knew I wasn't going to win a medal, but I did want to see, what of this is possible. Like, how far can I go? And so it was even a long shot to make it to the semis, but I end up qualifying for the semifinals. And just, I think, recognizing that, like, when we are at the, the start line, or, in my case, physical start line, in other people's world, like, event planner, like your event just finished in 2024 and now you're already looking for the sites of 2025 and you're like, holy moly, like, okay, let's do this again. You don't even realize what you're truly capable of, like, it's like in that moment at like anyone's version of a start line, it's like, we don't even know what we're capable of. And so at the beginning of that, quest to the Olympics after coming off the injury, I genuinely don't think I would have ever told someone like, I'm going to be like top 20 in the world, like, no, I wouldn't have said that. I don't think, until, I started to create some of this momentum. And then being at the Olympics, I qualified for the semifinals, and they often, when you finish for that race, they like kind of shuffle you along into the stands, and there's like a media track. And what that means is just back and forth through the stands. Like you stop at like every media outlet in the world, essentially. And you end up getting interviewed by different people. And they try to rush you up to the media track pretty quickly after you finish your race, because the next race is on the track. And the only times that you're ever really allowed to like stay on the track is if like you're kind of ill, you're gonna like pass out or you're vomiting or like whatever. And so I wanted a moment to just sit on the track and like absorb, like look into the stands, because I genuinely, walking to the start line, I was like looking down at my feet, like, stay focused, stay focused, stay focused. Like I didn't want to look up just yet because I didn't want to psych myself out. And so
Totally.
when I qualified for the semis and then I run the semis, when I was like finished, I was like, sorry, I need to sit for a second, like pretending a little bit like that I'm like more dizzy than I am. Because I just wanted a moment to like take it in. And there's actually a photo that a photographer captured of me sitting on the track on the side, you can see the stadium around me, and I'm just looking up, and like, I'm like getting goosebumps thinking about it again right now, but like, just like looking around being like, I can't believe I'm here. And that's where it's like, only then do you realize what you're truly capable of. And it's just, an inspiring thing for me to remember, even as I continue in my own life and becomes, part of my messaging that I share with others of like, why count yourself out now? Like, you don't even know what's possible. And so how do we keep pushing for more and not stopping ourselves before we even give ourselves a shot? There's again, like a line that I'll share in my keynote often where I talk about like, hit the hurdle, because so many people like are afraid to hit the hurdles. And so I think there are probably so many world-class runners who could have been Olympic hurdlers, but they wouldn't try the hurdles because they're so afraid of hitting the hurdle. And so it's like, what if in all of our lives, we were brave enough to just run at it and not be afraid to hit the hurdle? But we're so scared of like looking stupid, falling down, embarrassing ourselves in front of our colleagues that we don't take the risks. We don't try to hit the hurdle because what if it doesn't work out? But it's like, but what if it does?
But what if it does? I love
And
that.
so, yeah, if you're out there, like, what can you do this year that's going to allow you to hit the hurdle, to just run at it full force and not be afraid? Because I bet you'll learn a lot along the way. And you might even become an Olympic hurdler in the pathway.
You never know. Everyone has
You
their
never know.
own version of Olympics. So it's like maybe you're not physically going to the actual Olympics, but there is that thing that you're always working towards. And I love that mindset of, okay, let's push myself to get into this mindset of, okay, I can do this. What are some options of how I can, get to that point? Or how can I challenge myself to get to that point? Even if it doesn't feel realistic in this moment, just imagine what it could be if you could get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. So I want to talk about your keynote speaking, which is something that Sarah does today. What led you to initially pursue keynote speaking?
So initially, I got a few opportunities after qualifying for the Olympics to go and share the story about the power of believing in yourself. But I wasn't really an official keynote speaker at that time. It was more of just kind of a few opportunities. Where I actually started to embark on this journey as keynote speaker happened 4 years later after qualifying for the Olympics. I then had my second pursuit to the games at the Rio Olympics. And, I was now top 8 in the world. I was a medal hopeful for Rio. And I was excited to go perform for my coaches, for my teammates, for my sponsors, for everyone who had been there to support me, go win the medal, do the thing, get all the endorsement deals, retire from sport. Life was going to be great. And I end up tearing my hamstring 6 weeks before Olympic trials. And I go from being top 8 in the world to ultimately then I end up not even going, not even qualifying. And I actually still went because my whole family already had tickets, but I never got to compete as a top 8 athlete in the world. And I was devastated. And there's, again, a story that I share in my keynote about pulling into the driveway of the Airbnb we were staying at during Olympic trials. And I couldn't go into the house because I couldn't accept that Sarah Wells, the Olympian, isn't going to the Olympics. That doesn't add up. That doesn't make sense.
Can't even imagine.
And I actually quit sport after that moment. I opened the car door laying in this driveway after the Olympic trials. I fall onto the driveway and I just lay in fetal position and cry and cry. And I decided, I was like, I'm quitting this sport. I can't. I gave it everything and it took everything from me. And in that year off, I quit, but really I only quit for a year. I said it was forever, but ultimately it was just 1 year. And I realized in that year off that I actually believed in myself more strongly after not making the Olympics, even more so than when I did, because I still went to Olympic trials. I didn't let my hamstring that I tore define my outcome. I went for it anyways. And I only missed qualifying by 0.38 of a second. And I realized that unfortunately, hard work doesn't always lead to success. I had poured everything into this. I felt like I earned it. I deserved it. And when we all pursue these big goals and we put in the effort and energy, we feel like we earned it. And I totally agree. But though hard work won't always lead to success, being resilient will always lead to another opportunity for success. Because what led me to keynote speaking was that once I had that second half of the story, my sponsors were like, well, come tell us what happened. Why didn't you qualify? Let us know. And when I shared both the Olympic experience where I qualified and the Olympic experience where I fall short, far more people came up to me after the fact and said they were more inspired by the time where I didn't make the Olympics over the time where I did. And I think that's because we can all remember our lay in the driveway and fetal position and cry moment. And when I realized that like this was actually the message people needed to hear, that people need to recognize that success or setback is not an end point. It's a through point. It's a stepping stone on the next evolution for who we will become. And that's where excellence isn't about the outcome. Excellence is who we become in pursuit of that goal. And so suddenly I had this new message to share that was both healing for me, having gone through this experience and making it very purposeful now, and also seemed to impact audiences in ways I never even imagined. And so that led me to the next opportunity. And then suddenly I'm speaking for Salesforce and Coca-Cola and like Dow Chemical Company and like, you know, every company under the sun. Well, I wish every company under the sun, but you know, all types of industries that needed this message. And that's what ultimately had me experience like, this is what I want to do. And I feel like everything I went through was meant to be so that I could be this person for other people. And so I'm so grateful for both of my experiences because I think it's given me true empathy to understand both sides of the coin. People who give it their all, they are resilient, they believe in themselves and they achieve their goals. And how do I help them do that? And the people who believe in themselves, are resilient, get back up, do all the right stuff, and it doesn't work out. But this message of like hard work won't always lead to success, but being resilient and choosing to look towards the next evolution of yourself will help you find your opportunity for success.
Even if you're not a keynote speaker, why do you feel like it's so important to talk about all those times that you didn't win, or maybe you didn't hit the mark or something went wrong? Why is it so important to acknowledge those things and talk about it with other people?
I think it's because we all have these goals in our head and we're so quick to discount ourselves and then put other people on a pedestal where we assume like they probably have it all figured out, or like they didn't have to deal with as much thing like garbage and obstacles and challenge that we've had to deal with. And I think showing that like this is ultimately part of the journey. And even I think back to my training where my coach every single year would have to like give me a pep talk to be like, Sarah, we have this goal by the end of the year. At some point this year, you're going to miss a practice. At some point this year, you're going to get injured and you're probably going to sit on the sidelines for like, you know, a few days, if not a few weeks. So know that that's going to be part of it. And it's like, that was impossible for me to accept. I hated when he would give me that pep talk, but he's so right. And I think similarly, as we hear these stories of other people, you know, who we might deem, oh, an Olympic athlete, oh, she only knows success. Oh, she probably has it all figured out. For me to actually share the story of like, I'm going to get injured. Like I'm going to sit on the sidelines. And people recognize that it's part of all of our journeys to have challenging times, to have things not work out, so that they still remain hopeful and that they can still see themselves in the position of that goal and not kind of get defeated and deflated in those hard moments. They can see what's possible.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you have spoken for some amazing events, some big conferences. So I want to ask you, when you are giving a keynote speech, what is one lesson or an overall message that you really want people to take away from your talks?
Well, I think hopefully a few, but I think that there's this message around like, if we can remove limiting beliefs, then we can start to see our challenges as opportunities. And if we can remove those limiting beliefs, we can stop comparing ourselves to others and we can ultimately choose excellence. And so it's all about this again, like, let's remove our focus from being solely fixated on the outcome and instead choose excellence in who we become in pursuit of that goal. Like, still pick the ambitious goal, still put that as your finish line. And if you don't achieve it, recognize that it's like, how cool is it that that goal probably pushed you to become a different kind of leader, to encourage you to become a different kind of friend, to recognize the discipline and your skills and experiences that you're going to put in your pocket and be able to use going forward. And so it's like, yeah, excellence is about who we become in pursuit of the goal. That's really a big message.
One thing you have on your website that I really like is you wrote, excellence is about outperforming who you were yesterday. Mm-hmm. One, what does that mean to you? And two, do you feel like excellence is contagious?
Yes, I actually have a slide that says excellence is contagious. I actually, you know what? That's so funny. I'm like, wait, do you know my slide? Um,
Right.
so, so you asked two questions here. So what does excellence is outperforming who you were yesterday mean to me? So again, it's like we can all get so fixated on comparing ourselves to others and think that like, well, let's all be the Jeff Bezos of the world. It's like, well, like, you know, that is a great goal if that's something that you aspire to become, to put in your mind so that you push yourself to get as close to that as possible. But it's like if you're constantly comparing yourself to someone else, you have no control over like that other person. You only have
Mm,
control over like the actions and the mindset and things that you bring to the table. And so it's like comparing yourself instead to like who you were yesterday. And if we're constantly evolving and moving forward, then like we will find our version of success. We will move towards becoming the Jeff Bezos of our world. And so it's all about like how do we create the small steps that build our own momentum and help us get better every single day. That's what that means to me. The second question you asked was what again?
do you feel
Oh,
like excellence is contagious?
right, yes. So yes, I do. Excellence absolutely is contagious. And my coach used to have this saying where he would say, you know, when you come to practice, like we're all together, we share one brain. And what he meant by that was like if I get into the depths of a workout and I'm like, oh, this sucks, I don't want to do this, it's so hard, like I start influencing and infecting other people to be like, yeah, this is really hard, like, oh, I don't want to do this. But the inverse is also true, where if we're all like at our just depleted, like just brutal state, and I'm like, I'm so tired, but I'm going to give this next interval everything I have, then when I start pushing in the final 100 meters, my teammate's going to come with me, you know? And when the energy is high, when that effort is high, like we suddenly become inspired and to push to match it. I actually shared this story on social media the other day where I was on a run just in my local neighborhood, and there's like a loop around a lake. And this one person like runs by me and they're like really pushing it. And I was like, okay, like random
I
stranger,
see you.
like I'm supposed to be the Olympic runner here, you know? And I wasn't a long distance runner, so it's not my forte. But I see this person like really pushing themselves, and I was going easy on myself, you know, like I was just like out for a nice stroll. And when I see this person like actually pushing themselves, I'm like, can I do that? Like, should I be running at that pace? And so suddenly I start like picking up my pace to be like, okay, I don't want the distance to grow between them, like them and I. Like I want to make sure that I'm staying within reach. And so that run, I got more out of myself than I would have if I was just alone running around that park. Like because they were there, I pulled more out of myself. And so I think if we can all be that person to raise the bar, to set the example, like we can start to inspire others to do the same.
I love that. So it's not about comparing yourselves to others. It's more about, building each other up, inspiring other people, pushing each other to do bigger and better things.
Yeah, it's like just being simply in their presence. Suddenly you're being like, can I do that? Can I get faster? Can I, run a bigger event? Can I be the type of person who reimagines like what connection looks like at my conference? Like suddenly, like you just start looking to yourself to be like, can I ask more of myself too? Because you see it's possible. You see someone else doing it. So that's why I believe excellence is contagious.
Wonderful. So, as part of the Tag Talk community, we've got thousands of event planners, and I'm sure they are very eager to learn more about how they can book you. So, could you tell us how we can get in contact with you as far as your social media platforms and your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is thesarahwells.com, and Sarah with an H. And so they can go to thesarahwells.com, reach out through the contact page there, or I am active on Instagram and on LinkedIn, and I'm Sarah Wells 400mh, which is like 400-meter hurdles. Big regret on the handle. I feel like it's like a whole mouthful, but yeah,
I
Sarah
love it.
Wells 400mh.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. We've learned so much of how to navigate, life's hurdles, especially when those unexpected obstacles pop up in our way. And I'd really like to thank you for taking time out of your day to share all of your great insights, your story, and how to cultivate excellence. So thank you so much. And I definitely feel very inspired after hearing all of your stories and your fun tips.
I'm so glad. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. If you liked today's episode, make sure you subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with a friend.